Now we'll move on to our panel discussion. The title of the panel is Journey from Seed to Scale. And here we have all the people on the panel are the ones who are going to be talking about this, the entrepreneur, the investor, and of course the ecosystem enabler. So we're going to start off with a few questions. So the first one I have is for Anu. And during the session, if you have any questions, start noting them down because we're going to have a Q&A right after this session. So, Anu, my first question to you. So, tell us a bit about the child who was Anu, the 7 to 8 year old Anu, and what were her goals and what were her ambitions. So, did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
um 7 8 year old, or in those age, I don't think I had lofty ambitions of becoming an entrepreneur as such. But even at that age, I was always one a very curious kid. My parents used to make fun of me that I could talk on the phone for hours, listen to music, and study for the exams all at the same time. So I had amazing multitasking skills and time management skills always. And I used to read a lot. I loved some subjects. I would read up to like graduation books on those subjects even while in school. In terms of ambition, I came from a very, very traditional family. So my mom, she hadn't even studied up till 10th standard. So my ambition was, just limited to being independent and not, being much more educated and independent, if you would, and not be like the women that I saw around in my house. So that was the extent of my ambition at that time. I don't think becoming an entrepreneur was anywhere close in my sight at that point.
Wow, that might be very encouraging for all of us. And today where you are, it's truly inspiring. So, Shweta, for you, I wanted to ask, kind of a follow-on question, a two-part question. So, education was very important, I guess, even to Anu, and all of them sitting on the panel, by the way, are Ivy League, super well educated. So, this is a two-part question. So, how many Ivy League students are there in the house? One. Okay, see, I'm also not from an Ivy League institute, right? So, Shweta, I guess the question goes to you that, you know, I guess I'm talking on behalf of the entire group. How important really is pedigree when you are thinking of investing in an entrepreneur and a startup? I mean, do we have to belong to these institutions? And secondly, when we come to you for investment, when a lot of entrepreneurs come and approach you, so what do you really look at when you look at funding them?
So to answer the first part of your question, how important is a pedigree from an Ivy League university to be investable? I don't think it's very important. In fact, most of the investors, if you ask them, will tell you that they don't really care about the founder's education per se, in terms of what schools they went to. Uh, but what it does serve as a proxy for, if I have to kind of elaborate on that point, is that it gives us as investors some level of understanding of who would be the other people who would be part of your network. So, as an entrepreneur, one of the key things that I look for, at least as an investor, is can there be a talent magnet, right? Because you can't build long lasting businesses, organizations just by you being the solo sort of leader. And so, where I've seen it play a little bit of a part is essentially just serving as a proxy for whether this person has those kind of people within his or her network, such that they can actually be talent magnets, etc. And that doesn't therefore have to come from Ivy League, right? It could just be any college. It could be places that you've worked before. So those are the kind of elements people would look for. But per se, would we be more attracted to a Harvard alum versus someone who went to any other college? I don't think it makes such a big difference.
Great, very encouraging answer. Thanks, Shweta. Now, Arnab, coming to you. There are many problems that our country is facing right now, all the way from extreme poverty to lack of access to healthcare. And there was a very popular quote that I recently, came across, that in the future, every business will be an impact business. Every business will have some kind of social mission ingrained into it, just because that the consumer is changing now. So, how important is it for entrepreneurs these days to have social impact, if not the only motivation of their business, but as a component of their work?
Sure. Thank you, Priya. Thank you for having me. I think that's a very, very important question. And for those who are thinking of building their enterprises in India, that component is not a will, it's not a good to have, it's a must these days. If you look at most of the problems that are being solved and most of the companies that are doing well, they're solving a necessary business problem. And I'm especially grateful to all the technology companies who are taking a leap and trying to solve some of the challenges that this country has. Uh, it's very, very evident that the approach to solving problems for India, for 700, 800 million people who may not have access to the basic necessities, the solution has to be exponential. It can't be linear, and it has to be built trying to understand what India actually is and then building. Some of the examples that would have seen, Unified Payments Interface is a fantastic example. It was essentially the first step in ensuring you have a true meaning to financial inclusion. We are not there yet in terms of financial inclusion, if you ask me, but we have in the process of building the necessary steps to reach there. True financial inclusion happens when you have access to the products at a price that is affordable to you at an instant when you want it, which hasn't happened yet, but will eventually happen. A lot of people, some of you in this room would have questioned when we started opening zero balance accounts. What do zero balance account actually do? Uh, for some of us or most of us who are not very far from what happens in the real world, you have a maid coming to your house every day. Think what that zero balance account does to her account. If you actually have a constant stream of income going to that zero balance account, after a couple of years, a tech-enabled fintech company, an alternative lending company can actually try to smoothen their credit process and give them a fixed line of credit, because a pattern has been established of how this person is earning money, which would not have been the case if that person would not have had a bank account and a constant stream of income. The way your salary accounts determine your credit limit is also true for them. And that is how you have to start thinking, whether it is financial inclusion, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education. If you are going to build solutions for 100 million people, a billion scale people, that is where you start seeing impact. That's where you see the combination of profitability and impact and creating something that is truly phenomenal.
And also, just to add to that, most social impact businesses are also started by women. So that is a statistics globally right now. And so, Anu, I know that even you have definitely incorporated the new mindset of the millennials towards being environmentally conscious also in your in your organization. So, as some of you might know, and which I've already said, Anu has recently raised, more than $11 million in funding. And considering that the company was founded in 2017, I have to say, Anu, that it is very impressive, but it's also very intimidating for a lot of us at the same time. So the most important question that most of our audience has actually requested today is, when should they go for funding? So what is your advice?
Um, so I think you should always look at funding as something that will take you to the next level. Uh, but to get to the next level before your first round of funds, you should be clear on what you're doing. A lot of entrepreneurs, before they kind of walk into an investor's room, they're still paddling with different business models. They are still paddling with different revenue streams. So I think broadly, you're not expected to have all answers. When we raised a seed fund, we didn't have any idea of our customer acquisition costs or lifetime value of customer, because you are working at a very small scale to get a good handle on those numbers as such. But the core of the business, we knew that this is what we are going to lease a building, we are going to design it in a certain way. this is who we are going to sell it to, and this is why this guy will pay us a premium, and this is broadly the kind of premium that we can command over the informal market, and hence this is how I'm going to make money. So at least that clear path. You may still change after that. There may be more revenue models that emerge, there may be better cost structures that emerge, but at least from an investor's perspective, you should have that clear idea of what you are going to do, how you're going to make money, and you should have demonstrated that to some extent. That should be your first round when you approach the investor. Without doing that, and Shweta can support me on that, without doing that, I don't think in today's day and age, the business plan investment is something that's happening, or pre-revenue as we call it. Pre-revenue investment is not something that's really happening unless you are really discovering fire, in a way. So you,
So the clarity
yeah, the
has to be
clarity
there.
and some level of proof, some scale of proof with that business model is something which is essential as such.
Right. I think that's a very good takeaway, because even myself being a woman entrepreneur, these are some questions that are there in my mind. Which business plan to really go ahead with, and I'm sure all of us resonate with that. So Shweta, before I come to you with this, I would like to have an audience question. So imagine that the total pool of capital available for everyone in this world, the VC money is 100%. So what percentage of that do you think goes to women? So who are the above 60% of all VC capital goes to women? Hands up. No one? Okay. What about between, let's say, 30 to 60%? How many people think between 30 to 60% of the VC capital goes to women? No? And below 30? Okay. Everyone clearly pessimistic, but it's also a fact. So in fact, the statistic is that less than 15% of all venture capital is allocated to female founders. And
I think that's a very aggressive statistic, if I'm not wrong. If you look at just female founded founder teams, there could be teams with like one female founders that constitutes 15%. But if you look at just purely female founder teams, that number is less than 1%.
wow,
Yeah.
purely female founders. Okay,
I
so
think
maybe
it's
this is a statistic.
0.2% or something.
It's a mixed statistics probably. This is wow. This is even more shocking and hard to digest. But I don't think that we should be discouraged by that if we are female founders sitting in the audience. Although, another statistic is that women only raised 70% of the amount that men raised to start their firms. So we ask for lesser, and that's what I would just like to ask Shweta now. Given these statistics, and even I guess, the new statistics of 1%, what do you have to say about that, and what do you look at when you have a female founder approaching you?
So I just want to quickly share a little bit of context about my background before I dive into that. So the name that you see here attached to my profile, Sol Primero, is the fund that I set up back in 2014. And my co-founder for the fund is a female, right? And the idea at that point in time was I had recently completed my MBA. I moved back to India. I was working with Zomato, doing international operations for them, and as I'd started my career along with my co-founder in London. Both of us were investment bankers, so we had a lot of friends who were looking to become angel investors in India, and they were not sitting in India. So they wanted someone on the ground here who could help them choose the right opportunities, who could give them a sense of what's actually going on in the market before they went ahead and made some of these angel investments. And that's how Sol Primero was born. We actually pooled about $2 million from our friends and family and set up a Mauritius-based fund called Sol Primero, through which we invested across 9 companies. But the funny story there is that in 2015, almost 60% of the fund was deployed, of the 2 million was deployed, and we decided to go out and raise $25 million external capital, which would not be friends and family, and try to scale up our operations. And at that point in time, we had fairly interesting startups which were part of our portfolio. One of them was Zorooms, which was in a lot of news at the time, had raised about $25 million from Tiger Global, was competing with Oyo head on. And things looked great, and so we wanted to go out and raise this 25 million and become India's very first female only early stage fund. And well, we weren't able to do that. And long story short, I then went ahead and continued to invest, but I had to find a job, and I worked across various organizations. um, but the most interesting part of that fundraising experience while we were on the road was just the kind of questions we would get. And I've been part of meetings, especially trying to raise money from family offices in the Middle East, where we've had to sit behind a divider because the head of the family was a male, and they didn't want to have eye to eye contact with the females. And the reason why they were even interested in talking to us was because they had a daughter who was Harvard educated, and she wanted to basically back us. Um, I've been in family office meetings in India where I've been asked outright. I was engaged at that point in time. Questions like, "Oh, so what about your commitment to the fund once it's raised?" Basically hinting at once you get married, what's going to happen. So these were the questions that I have faced myself, being a founder of a fund. And so I completely understand and empathize with what happens when you're on the other side of the table. Now, coming back to your question specifically, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to continue as an investor. It would have been very easy for us to kind of fold and just go and look for another job. And I'd just been about a year and a half out of Zomato. I could have gone back and asked for my job back, but I was adamant, and I stuck the ground. Um, See, the reality is, my answer may not be the answer that most investors at least think. I mean, I'll give you the answer that I know people will give you, and then I'll tell you what actually happens, right? So the answer is no, it doesn't matter. Obviously, we want diversity, we want women, we want to look at businesses that are solid, and it doesn't matter who the founder is. And that's really the tone you'll always hear. But I'll tell you where the reality is. I think what tends to happen is that there are not enough women who are on the other side of the table, right? And I faced this during Sol Primero. I faced it even recently when I became a new mom and I was asking for certain infrastructure to be provided in my workplace so that I could, still take care of a 3-month-old baby and be at work, right? And I don't know how many of you in this room have had kids, but there are lots of things that you have to think of in terms of permutations and combinations if you want to be back at work. And if that infrastructure is not provided to you, it's harder to operate. And I was not able to get what I wanted. And so if you're a fund or you're a VC or you're an employer and you're kind of looking at two equally capable candidates, equally qualified to do the job, founders otherwise, and you're having to choose, there are times where you would probably choose the man. And the reason for that is they're going to ask for less exceptions. And the reason for that is because there haven't been enough women that people think it's important to invest in that infrastructure that will be utilized enough, and hence think that it's an exception. But the reality is, if we want women to be on the table, if we want women to be part of this economy, we need to think about the infrastructure that is needed for women to be able to operate without having to, think about other ways in which they can find meaning in life, right? A
Actually,
lot of
that's
women.
a great caveat to Arnav, because the infrastructure that women need. So, Arnav, you know what I'm going to ask you, but the journey for a female founder and entrepreneur is a very lonely one. And Shweta has shared as a very candid, and thank you for that, truthful experience that she faced. And a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start and don't have the courage, especially women entrepreneurs, to ask for what they want, they probably need a lot of mentorship, access to various skills such as financial skills, legal skills, etc. What is, I guess, the government doing about it, and what is Niti Aayog? You have started a platform called the Women Entrepreneurship Platform. So what are you doing to actually combat some of these issues?
Absolutely. Look, I'm a person of numbers, and if 14%, 1%, whatever is the actual number, that needs to be fixed. It's absolutely horrific, and it has to be fixed, plain and simple as that. More people should be investing in women-led startups, and more people should be aware of such startups is, I can't put it as simple as that. And the bigger point is that if you start saying that people are not investing in women-led startups, we are actually trivializing the process. It's several years, decades of biases that are built in our minds, our societies, our systems. So for example, I'm sure that if you had a Wharton female investor, they would have helped you raise money faster than, say, XYZ. So it's not just a combination of gender, of course, plays a bigger role here, but multiple other facets that go into this. This is true for anything. I mean, if you start thinking of building a career in Wall Street investment banking, you will see that only people who have had a lineage will have a better chance or a fairer chance of getting a career on Wall Street. So it's a reflection of how things and how biases have been coded into the system over and over again, and that needs to be broken. One of the things that we have been doing at Niti Aayog, this we have been doing for the past 2 years, is we have established something called a women entrepreneurship platform. At this point in time, we have about 15,000 uh, women registered on the platform, either having their own startups or aspiring to become women entrepreneurs in the near future. Several initiatives are being rolled out for them. The first and the foremost is people should be aware of the fantastic work that these women entrepreneurs are doing. So we have been doing that through multiple initiatives, one of which is Women Transforming India Awards. We just did the jury round for that on 6th, this Friday, and the main event, the finals is on 15th December 2019, where we'll be recognizing top 15 women entrepreneurs from across the country. That's just the start. They should be out there, people should be celebrating their stories. That's one simple way to do it. What we have also done is we have tied up with investors who have committed to investing in women-led startups. At this point in time, we have commitment of over 10 million, and we are keen to keep expanding that pool so that women who are looking for uh, their say seed round investments or something higher than that should be able to access that. Related to that, we have pitching events that will keep happening across the year for women-led startups. Uh, in fact, if I'm not wrong, Startup India a couple of days ago actually announced a 100 crore fund only for women-led startups. So things are moving in the right direction. This is not enough yet. A lot more needs to be done. Government is just a small part of what needs to be done. We are enablers, and a lot more of it is as simple as removing the biases, and then we'll see. It doesn't matter what your gender is, doesn't matter what your background is. If you have a fantastic business proposition, uh, if it is an interest area of the investor, they should be investing. There shouldn't be any other factor affecting that, and that should be our role as a government to make sure that anything that is auxiliary to your business should be taken care of while you focus on your business.
Wow, I think thanks, Arnab. That was very, I'm sure, very motivating for the audience, because I think a lot of us in the audience, we did a small, dipstick as to how many entrepreneurs here are really looking at that seed stage, and how many of you want to really scale now and have figured it out to a certain level. So I'll switch over to Anu. So Anu, going from a seed stage and then scaling so much again in the span of 2 years. I just have to emphasize that continually, because it's very impressive. How did you really go from seed to scale, and how has the journey been, and what is the support system that you've built around yourself in order to enable that growth for your organization?
Sure. So just to break down the scale context, we were actually in November 2018 when we raised our Series A, and he would know about it. We were about 15 employees, about 600 beds across India in management. And in March 2019, we were 150 plus employees, and we had already signed up 10,000 beds. So actually, the scale up is, less than 6 months or so. I think the reason why the scale up can be so quick is when we raised the capital, we had a very clear path. Coming back to my previous thing that I said, we had a very, very clear path on how we are going to expand. That's when we went for our Series A. We knew exactly what kind of buildings we have to acquire, exactly what kind of markets we had to target. We had that whole, kind of background work figured out. So once the money hit the bank, then you are just basically executing on the plan that you have already figured out. Secondly, I think in terms of scaling up, the most important criteria is hiring. And I couldn't emphasize more on the importance of hiring and hiring the right team and the right set of people. So once you have raised that capital, basically, even before that, you need to have a good sense of what kind of team you need to hire. And that is a more extensive brainstorming exercise than one could imagine when you get to it. Because even when you're trying to hire a marketing head, right, for example, we had to have like several discussions around exactly what kind of person we need. Because there could be some who are just very good with digital marketing, going out, running campaigns, getting conversions. There could be some who are more brand building focused, some who are more offline focused, some who have done a mix of everything. So what is it that you are looking for? Because every profile would be different. So just having that nailed out beforehand, so that when you go into hiring, you can really look for the right people. And basically, in terms of support system, I think once you've raised the capital, and speed is what you've determined is to be the most important thing. You need to kind of figure out pieces of the puzzle that will help you get that speed, right? So don't worry about spending money on getting a headhunter at that point. Getting that team in place 6 months is much more valuable than the amount of money that you're getting to spend on getting the right headhunter. Um, Building your early team, kind of paying more than the market or what you're getting to pay to them. That team, one person will, help you get 6 months past where you could be, right? So that becomes worth it. So I think a lot of scaling up is basically to do with two things. One is having clarity of what you need to do in terms of business model, so you can go ahead and execute. And second, having the right team. Those I just couldn't emphasize enough on the importance of the right team as such.
And we all want that right, perfect team. We are all looking for them.
That's also the hardest thing to
That is
get right.
definitely
Yeah.
the hardest thing, definitely. So, a final question, from Shweta and Arnab, you can chip in if you like, since your focus is technology. So, just a poll again from the audience: how many of you work in businesses which don't have an app associated to them? That seems to be a lot of people. And how many in who are pure technology businesses? Okay, so Shweta, just a question from your end. How important is technology? If someone comes to you with an offline service based model versus someone who comes to you with a purely tech model, how important is that for you to make that call of investing in them?
I guess it depends on the kind of investor that you're pitching to, right? So, doing your diligence and knowing what is important to the investor and what are they actually looking for. So, if you ask me specifically, I only look at technology led businesses because that's what my background is and that's what I understand the best. But there are investors out there that are willing to look at non-technology. In a lot of investment has been happening in brands. If you look at various consumer brands that have popped up over the last few years, from Paperboat, etc. So there is dollars being allocated to non-tech um, ideas and companies. It's just that you then have to go to that specific investor because there are funds essentially operate under a mandate, and if the mandate doesn't allow non-tech investments, then they can't give you the money.
If your business is very niche, if it's extremely differentiated, then probably you do not need a large tech angle to it. But if you're in a business where several other people are competing and you're competing for scale or you're competing for efficiency, you have to have a strong tech team and a tech platform for you to be able to cater to whatever needs the business have.
So yeah, so I think that's definitely a dilemma because technology is expensive to build for any entrepreneur. So I think that will help in people deciding on whether they should which route they should take. So a final I'll go around the panel, and if you can have one line to really close on what would be, I know this is always a hard part of panels, what's that one line, but what would be your message to all the females in the room who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs or to scale their businesses?
Um, I think if I could say one thing is to really be honest in telling your story, especially if you're trying to raise your funds, right? These guys earlier, they talked about raising capital as female entrepreneur for females, but what I have seen in my experiences, it's not like there is a very categorical bias that you are a female and that's why you won't be able to raise funds. It's essentially they are not getting comfort around something they want to get comfort around, right? So in our example, we are both female entrepreneurs. Both the founders are female, and we are in one of the most difficult businesses where you'll find very few women working, real estate, right? And it's a very real concern that an investor could have. I have had situations where in WeWork, a property owner would walk in to sign a lease agreement, and the first thing he does is take out a gun from his pocket and put it on the table, right? So that's a reality of that industry. And when somebody is doubting whether you're the right person to invest behind or not, they have very real concerns, which being a female may be a proxy for not being able to handle some of their concerns. So you have to kind of be more proactive than a male to understand what those concerns might be and kind of address that through your narrative. It could be stories of resilience from your personal life, or how do you craft that narrative is up to you. But you should be truthful about, if you're confident that you can handle that business, you've done it before, you have the right skills, you should be able to craft a story and tell a true story about yourself that helps lay a lot of those concerns to rest.
Wonderful advice. Thanks Anu. Shweta.
I think for me, the biggest message that I'd like to leave out there is just be honest with yourself and sort of think about what is it that you really want to do and go ahead and do it. I think one of the things that I lack, and maybe it's because I tend to overthink, I tend to overplan. I've always kind of wanted to have my future mapped out 2 steps ahead, and I'm only recently beginning to sort of look at things more opportunistically. But it's quite refreshing. It's very energetic. So my only message would be just be honest with yourself. If something's not working and your desire is to do something completely different, just go for it. I think passion has a very big role to play in most people's success. In fact, when if you read a lot of biographies, you'll realize that most of the successful people out there chose to pursue their passions, and that's where success came along the way. And not a lot of it was planned. So just let the universe take over.
Wow. I know.
So I'm one of those guys who's almost always very, very positive. So for the people in this room, if you are on the edge, please go ahead and start your firm now. If you're deciding, just go ahead and do it. Right now is probably the best time ever in the history of humankind to start your business, especially if you're a female founder, despite all the negative statistics, etc. The journey will not be an easy one, but if there was a time, now is the time. Just go ahead and do it. And there are people like us who will try to be invested in your success.
Okay, can we have a huge round of applause for the panel? So now is the interesting part. I'm going to open it up for some burning questions you have. And there always has to be that one first person who asks the question, after which all hands will be raised. So who's going to be that first person? Lovely. Can we have a mic? Thanks, Antra.
Hi, I'm Sakshi Talwar. I have an e-commerce platform called Rugs and Beyond. where we empower local weavers and artisans in rural India for home decor products. So my question is to everyone, either any of you can answer it. Whenever, like, at the point when you were starting your venture or when you were starting your venture and you as well, what was the biggest hurdle that you all faced? And, of course, we have naysayers all the time. So how did you face that and how did you overcome that?
I'll just go first. I think the biggest hurdle when I was looking to build the fund in my mind was, like I said, trying to sort of put the entire puzzle together and wanting to see the full picture, because that's how I am in general. And very quickly realizing that that's not how entrepreneurship works. So for me, that the fact that you just have to learn to deal with unknowns on the fly, learn to deal with chaos, that took some fine tuning. And what I've realized is that good entrepreneurs who are successful, because I was not, are inherently able to do that. And that's why they succeed. So just being able to kind of see what would come your way and then tackle it along the way is very, very important.
I think for me personally, I started pretty late in life. I worked for about 12 years before I started entrepreneurship, and I spent a lot of time studying. So I was basically old when I started. And for me, just leaving, finally calling it quits in terms of leaving a very comfortable job. I had a fantastic job that I loved in all other aspects, very rich paycheck coming every month. I think
That
just
takes a lot of courage.
that, I think once you do that, then you essentially give yourself no choice but to make it work, right? And the day you walk out of that, then you have to make it work, because there's too much on the line for you, right? Both in terms of your personal sacrifice, your financials, as well as how the world kind of looks at you, right? You were successful, you quit your job to start something, your family is questioning, everybody is questioning. So once you take that choice away from you, you are determined to kind of make it work. And taking that choice away from you, I think, is the most difficult thing that I did during that part.
So you're actually starting from ground zero. Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
Hi, I'm Taruna Seth. I run, and right now it's an offline travel, experiential travel company, which caters to experiential and immersive travel only. So I think one of you spoke about niche, that if it's like a niche, I think you said that. I just would like you to elaborate that. If you're in a niche segment, how important, you kind of touched upon it, that it's not that important to be tech based. But I feel in today's day and age, you still kind of need to have one foot in the door, and it's like a sweet spot. How can you combine tech with offline service and kind of enhance the consumer experience?
So what I meant was, if your business proposition is high value and you can sustain low volumes, you probably don't need tech as much. I mean, you can do with minimal social media outreach. But if your business proposition is extremely commoditized, then you need a large tech support. How else will you acquire customers?
So it's for customer acquisition per se.
In most of the cases, it's about first the customer acquisition and then servicing those customers. Both the angles come in.
So I just want to shed some light on that. When I started my business, it was largely offline for about a year and a half before I really invested in a tech team and in really getting that online. Because first, it just depends on the nature of your business, I think. Because first, I proved my model offline and then I transitioned to online. So I think that is something which, if your model is already working offline, you can then further scale it up and expand it once you have the technology to enable that.
Hi, I'm Mukta. So I have a brand called Home Veda. It's a home decor brand. So we are very new, just a year old, and so I'm a single one-woman army, you can say, doing everything from the product to the marketing. And my question is that when is the right time to think about funding? I remember what Anu said, that you should have done your research and sorted out, and you should have a plan. But is it like an intuitive thing that happens, or How do you figure
So
out that?
I think, okay, let me take a step back. That question was when you think it's the right time to raise funds. But I think even before that, the question should be, do you need to raise funds,
That
right?
was the
And
second part of
yeah,
my
yeah.
question.
Do you even need to raise capital, right? So it really depends on the kind of business that you are in. That determines whether you need to raise capital because you are at a point where you think external capital can give you that push. You can probably on your own cash flow go from 1 to 10, but if you have to go from 1 to 100, you need external capital push. And if you've answered that question, it could be because of scale, it could be because you're trying to define your product and stuff. So if you've answered that question, then you would be in a better shape to say that, okay, I need to get to scale, hence I need external capital. But to get to scale, do I have all the other pieces of the puzzles in place? Do I know what scale, what is it I need to scale, right? So if you've answered why you need to raise capital, I think a lot of other questions will kind of emerge on their own that need answering.
Hi, my name is Sheena. I have a coffee startup by the name of 16 Grams Coffee.
We have your cups here.
Oh, yeah.
And please do go and have some 16 grams coffee after the session. We have a very proud women-led business right behind us.
So we're fairly new, and I was in a real estate private equity background before this. And although I've done a lot of pitch books, financial modeling, but now we are at a stage where we want to start thinking of raising capital. But my concern is that what do investors look at that first meeting? I mean, I've done so much. How thorough should it be? Where do you draw the line? Like, how detailed should it be, or how small a discussion should it be? Like you can't. I have so many thoughts, and I can't put it all and convey it in one small meeting. So, how detailed or how less detailed should it be? Like, what is that first? What do investors usually look at in the first meeting?
Um, so personally, for me, in the first meeting, the less detail and the more I get to know you as an entrepreneur works better. But that's just my style as an investor. Uh, in my mind, the kind of the waterfall in which I make decisions about whether I want to even invest in meeting you again is some personality traits that I genuinely look for in an entrepreneur. So if you spend 90% of the time just talking about the details of your business and only 10% talking about your motivation, why you started it, how you're thinking about growing it, how you see this, I think it's going to be very hard for me to kind of really take a call on whether we take that second meeting, because the second meeting is when I want to really get into the depths of your business understanding. But equally, it's important that in the first meeting, you get me excited enough to want to learn more about your business. So you can't just talk about you and yourself and your background. You need to leave enough nuggets in there that once I kind of put that tick mark in my mind that, oh, I feel that this person could be a great founder, could really build a great team, great product. Well, it looks like they've also started to think and work in the direction of the bright business model, right? So you need to be able to give that detail out there and keep the investor guessing for more. I mean, it's the reality. It's kind of like teaser videos, right? When you watch a Netflix movie, you don't want to see the entire movie in the teaser, but you want to know enough that you want to invest the 2.5 hours to watch it. Just think of it that way.
Thank you.
Yes, we have a question at the back. Loving the questions, by the way.
My question is for Priya. So you talked about the tech bit that you brought into your business later on. So are you from a tech background? And how did you go about building a tech team and a tech platform? Going forward, how big the tech is going to be in your business and how are you going to take care of that? So.
Great question. I'm not at all from a tech background, and I don't understand a line of code. And I think, I mean, of course, it was hard for me to evaluate, for example, who to hire. Uh, Simply because I was not able to really evaluate their skills from a very technical perspective. And secondly, if I had to outsource a big part of my technology, how to evaluate that organization. And I think I crashed and burned a few times, lost a lot of money. simply because I did not really understand fully what someone was building for me. For example, if somebody said, okay, I can get this done in 2 months, I never knew how to benchmark that, simply because should it be actually done in 1 month, or should it be done in 6 months? So I think that understanding gap was there in initially. But for that, I actually hired someone in my team who I trust enough, because at the end of the day, if you don't know a certain skill, you have to either hire somebody who you really trust with that skill and allow them to make those decisions for you. And that is what has really worked now for me, that now I've got someone on my team who fully understands that, and he is able to make those decisions on my behalf, and I trust that those are the right decisions. And going forward, definitely, at least for my organization specifically, technology will play a huge role. We are in healthcare, and health tech is something that we definitely want to go deeper into. So in the future, for scaling purposes, I think technology will definitely play a big role. But we didn't start that way. So if that helps.
If I may add to that, so that's a fantastic way to think about it. Uh, we did a master class with Naya Sagi, founder of Baby Chakra. Exactly similar background as Priya, no tech background, but has a fantastic tech platform right now. It's available on our Facebook page, Women Entrepreneurship Platform. Have a look. It's a very easy 5-7 minutes video, which captures all the essence of what you should be looking in if you are to build a tech platform, being a non-tech person.
Any last question? Oh, we have one.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful panel, first of all. Really educative in a way that we get our minds thinking. I have a question for Arnab, I would say. When you are saying there are women programs being built with the government, how much do you think there is an ecosystem where these women entrepreneurs can openly reach out to you? Although you say you do have 15,000 entrepreneurs, how active are they? What's the ecosystem that you're providing, and what are the next steps for them? Because of course signing them up is one step, but getting them enabled is another.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that is a very important question, and that is something that keeps us working all the time. It's very easy in a country as large as India to sign up people, and the more difficult part is then to deliver. So that's have been our endeavor to make sure that if you have a genuine need from the platform, we help you in any way possible. Otherwise, you'll not be an active user on the platform. Priya is a WEP registered entrepreneur. We have Antra in the room. She helps us a lot with all our WEP endeavors. So we are trying to build in the systems where we are able to match you with the needs that you have. And we, at least in our part of the government, we are under no illusion that we can solve all your problems. We work through partners. At this point in time, we have about 40 partners who are active on the platform. For example, if you're a company, a lot of companies have faced problems with GST registration. Or I was shocked to know that in one of our visits to Bangalore, there was a company which was a startup which was actually filing taxes. The CA for that company was giving them wrong advice. It's a startup. You don't need to file taxes for the 3 years for the first 10 years of your existence. So the way we have done it is we have tied up with Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and they have committed to having 2 volunteers in every city that will help you with these kind of questions, apart from a very, very comprehensive FAQ being on the portal. What we are also in the process right now is making sure that this platform that we have is completely tech-driven, in the sense that we are trying to build in an element of ML in that it should be able to connect you dynamically between the users and the partner who can best solve or help with their problems. So that is a tech piece we are trying to solve. In the meantime, we are doing this as a combination of heuristic and manual process, but we have partners in almost every aspect of your entrepreneurship journey that can actually help you with whatever your requirements may be.
Yes. Hi, I'm Aditi. I'm a founder of a design agency. It's called Design Crew. We deal in branding, social media, website. So basically, being in a service sector, and this is sort of a self-sustenance model. We don't really require that much of capital to be in this sector. But for me, the word funding, more than the capital, I think I need direction. Is that enough reason to have funding in a sector
That absolutely not.
Yeah.
Don't raise money unless you need it. And I'll let her answer because she can talk to you offline about the pain that investors bring.
I totally agree. Don't raise a single dime unless you absolutely need it. You can have mentors. You can have, a lot of other different kinds of ecosystem if you're just looking for support. If you're looking for, there are now a lot of debt companies also available if you have working capital gaps or you want debt against your receivables. It's more like a consulting cycle where you provide the services and then you have your collections. So you have a lot of those alternate sources of funding as well. If you need limited capital support, which is more intermediate, you need guidance in terms of the industry. There are a lot of other ecosystems and platforms that are available to provide that. But equity capital should be raised only when you absolutely need it, because our investors fortunately haven't been so painful, but it does come with a lot of expectations, right? So even if you don't want to run from 1 to 100, you are basically signing off your life to get to that scale because you've promised a certain level of returns to them, right? So equity capital comes with its own stresses and its own set of nuances. You should raise it with a very clear mandate and be prepared to, write off a part of your life in exchange for that.
Not just
Yeah.
equity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I would just want to, thank all of you for being here. Can we have another round of applause for
Thank
the
you for being
wisdom?
such a wonderful host. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you. So this is, of course, a very big effort from the Global Shapers Gurgaon community. So thanks to all the people from the Global Shapers community. One round of applause for them. They put in a lot of hard work to make this happen. And the interesting thing about today's event is that your name tags would have an E or an I written on it, so entrepreneur or investor. So there are entrepreneurs and there are also investors in the audience, and there are some people aspiring to be either. So please feel free to connect with them. Please feel free to connect with the Global Shapers. And please do drink some amazing coffee, by 16 grams of coffee. You can always stay in touch with us on our social media platforms as well. The Global Shapers Gurugram Hub is there on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that. And please feel free to connect with the panelists, I guess, in post networking session. And thank you so much for spending your Sunday here with us. Thank you.